Hi. So I'm back. After 2 years. I mean, less than that on TikTok, but I barely use that anyway. So I think I got this camera working. I say think because we see how this goes. So I'm going to try this all again. This is the closest I have to a background, the demi-male flag. Let's get into it, I guess. So, Halsey has a new album out, The Great Impersonator. What do I think? I would like to get a Halsey tattoo. I'm thinking something to do with gasoline, because I like colours, and I like the idea of getting like a red and lilac and blue. But I don't like the idea of having a song that references Matty Healy. I mean, the song's about Matty Healy. I don't really like the idea of that. If not that, something to do with If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, because I love that album. I liked it when it came out, but my love has only grown for it. I mean, 2021 was a great year for music. Like, my top 5 is like Spirit Box, AGR, This, Churches, Biffy Clyro. There was some great stuff that year. I am using this because otherwise I don't know what to do with my hands, otherwise I'll go insane. So yeah, what do you think? Obviously I like it. I really like it. I do think it's going to need a few listens to sink in, but then so did If I Can't Have Love. And also because I had to have my ear syringe recently, so taking it a bit slower. Others don't think so as much. Fair, and that's okay. I am trying to do this in like one go, and I have a script here. So, not to assume you know anything about Halsey, but The Great Impersonator was written during a time where she thought she was dying, and was contemplating her own death, and leaving her 3-year-old son behind. So, fun. And that's on top of already having to live with, and here's the list: bipolar endometriosis, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, Sjögren's syndrome, probably saying that wrong, sorry, mast cell activation syndrome, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, lupus, and T-cell disorder. Jesus Christ, Halsey. I'm amazed you get out of bed in the morning. You have more reason not to than anyone else at this point. I cannot literally be not me. God. Need to enunciate. So yeah, it's not exactly the most fun subject matter. And then Pitchfork dropped their review by Shah D'Souza, I believe. Which is not well reviewed in itself. Ironic. And then the theneedledrop dropped their review. Insert your own a second plane has hit a tower meme if you want. I don't have the energy. So yeah, that happened. We're going to get into that today. This felt so damn snarky to read. It was like, it's a generic queer thing to say, but it was like, really? You thought you ate with that? Really? Girl, you couldn't even take a bite before it was snatched out your grasp. I don't know if that'll even work or not. It feels like they find Halsey to be a hypocrite because their emotions don't always align. Has anyone told Shah that emotions don't work on logic? Because I think if we all try to analyse our emotions like that, we'd find it's almost a universal truth that they don't. That's just my take, so yeah. It feels like there's a lack of empathy from Shard here, which isn't inherently wrong or right, but it doesn't paint them in the best light here. One of the main points for me is that Shard seems to think Halsey is fake, that she's trying to paint herself as a victim. And I can totally understand looking at Halsey and being like, oh, boo-hoo, sucks to be you, your rich success in your mansion. I don't know if she has a mansion, I don't know. But especially in this day and age, yeah, with like the way the world is, like, yeah, of course. But even if that's the case, is Halsey really the one to be going after here? And again, when you know everything about what she's gone through medically, like even people I know who've no interest in Halsey, I've talked about this with them and they've been like, yeah, it seems a bit harsh. And how good or bad that empathy is up to you. I don't think it really matters in this. But at worst, Pitchfork comes off as accusing Halsey of not having suffered enough for the levels of misery for her, to warrant the levels of misery that is on display in the Great Impersonator, which is, again, purely subjective. I think you can't really hold everyone to the same standards in that sense. Bit of a broad statement, I know, but you know, the reviewer doesn't have to agree with everyone else. That's fine. But it is also just like, it reads as cold and dismissive, targeted and malicious at worst, almost accusing Halsey of lying, which we'll get to that in a minute. But, and we've known people, who act like that, who are like, oh, you can't complain, I've suffered so much more than you. It's like, oh, those are the worst. Because it's giving the children dying in Africa, like those people, they don't care about the dying children in Africa. I think that's part of why it's so somebody we love, because we all know someone who's like that in our lives, and how annoying that can be. I mean, you know, amongst everything else. So we expected it to be more diverse in sound. As a Pitchfork, but this is more of a focus here, so I will focus on it more here. And sure, I get that. Like, there could be more diversity to it, but you can say that about every album, and it's just personal preference at best. And I'll admit I was surprised when she named Evanescence as the influence on Lonely is the Muse, because initially to me that was like, I just thought 90s alt rock and Nirvana. That's just me. I knew she was influenced by those acts. And again, it's music, and it's all up to our own interpretation. One of the main points of this, to me at least, was he felt it didn't impersonate enough. That, again, personal taste with the way Fantano was talking, it seemed like he expected basically a covers album. And his problem is it wasn't that, but it was a Halsey album. Shocker. I mean, influence can take many shapes, you know, like, it could be as simple as a single line or a melody or something like that. Or maybe there shouldn't be some mandated, if you say you're influenced by this, you have to play like this, or read like this, or sound exactly this percentage of it, otherwise you can't claim influence. Like, that's not how it works. It's a lot more clean cut to do, you know, a bunch of photo shoots of you cosplaying as these artists than it is to convey that through music itself. And another point he made, acting like she would make a record as influential as these artists felt a stretch at best, and it's basically impossible to compare these kind of things, especially as it's barely a month old and these records are, you know, decades old, and the industry is a vastly different place now to what it was back then. And maybe, you know, in 100 years, Bring the Horizon will be considered as influential a metal band as Black Sabbath. But it's kind of pointless trying to compare the two right now, because one is over 50 years old and the other's 20, and it's just, you know, time. You need time for influence to really set in. And the last point on this, that Princess Weeks is doing a whole video on. I've not watched it yet. I'm going to wait till I've done this before I watch it, is main character syndrome, which, it's her album. Who is supposed to be the main character of a Halsey album if not Halsey? It just doesn't make sense. Like, oh, she's the main character of her own universe. We all are, because it's us. It's a critique that personally I do think you can just dismiss, because it just makes no sense. You sit there for 2 seconds, it's like no, I understand what you're going for there. It's not that you can't critique an album or artist, it's just when you call yourself a critic, from the public perspective, that forms an image. And we expect you to conduct yourself a certain way because of that image. And doing something outside of that makes people react in a certain way. Stupidly, obviously, but to the house a word that doing something outside of that image isn't wrong, obviously. But again, from a public perspective, we expect you to conduct yourselves with a level of professionalism we wouldn't hold to others. So when you go against that level of professionalism and make a review that seems to take shots at their personal life and there's less focus on the album, well, of course people are going to be annoyed. You can't, not saying you can't criticise the music because the artist's personal life sucks, but when you seem to be attacking the artist's personal life through the review, it raises a few flags, you know? So both these reviews describe this album as angsty. Each to their own. I get finding it angsty kind of, but also like, no. Angst is a lot of things. But anyway, the dictionary definition of anxiety is a feeling of anxiety, apprehension, or insecurity. The idea of, again, writing about contemplating your own death and the aftermath of this doesn't seem to match with angst. Or does it? See, when you look at the literal dictionary definition, it fits pretty well. But when we think of angst, we don't think of that. We think of the social construct of angst, per se. Which, when we hear that, we think of ratty, teenage, pouty face, grumpiness, edgelords, not this idea of, to me at least, an inauthentic and invalid emotional state. That being angsty isn't legit. You aren't really feeling true pain. Which, now that I say it, I just sound like Nagato, aka one of the most emo villains of all time. Oh god. Is, dare I say it, a way to gaslight people for feeling stuff because you can't take them seriously and do not want to acknowledge what these people are going through as a legitimate negative emotional state. You don't want to take home what that means and how you should respond, instead of just shutting it down. And I'm tired of this invalidation of mostly kids' emotions as being not worthy of analysis or taken seriously. Like, when clearly a lot of it can be foundational to emotional damage and trauma later in life. Full transparency, I'm not using science here, I'm using what I've experienced in my own life and observed through people around me. And in that case, then, yes, this is definitely fits under the version of angst that is being described by Fantano. They don't seem to think this album's going through true pain. It's merely teenage level pouting. Which, again, knowing the context of this album and what Halsey's mental and physical state was during this, just looks really bad on their part. To look at all that and go, nah, not suffering enough for this. I'm not going to speak for women. Come on. But it's been made clear over time, especially the past decade, that women feel their lived experiences haven't been viewed as valid or in the eyes of the public, and especially men. I mean, look at how the world treated Britney during her meltdown. So this feels more like that tidal, dismissive nature in general that we are trying to move past as a society, aka misogyny. And this just feels like a new version of that in a way. Just a rehash. In 2019, Pace magazine reviewed Lover by Taylor Swift. And the Swifties did what they are known to do and attacked them. So when this site reviewed the Tortured Poets Department, they decided not to include a critic's name to avoid this, so that they could post their opinion without fear of doxing. Because God forbid someone posts a bad review. Thing is that they aren't the only ones who've done this. So whilst I get being angry at these guys for these reviews, I think there are absolutely valid critiques to be made. I've made some. This isn't the way to go about it. I know it's incredibly obvious, but it still needs to be said at this point. What do we think the roles of critics is in this day and age? I feel some they are not needed because everyone's a critic these days. Sometimes I feel like there's expectation for critics to not let any of their personal feelings get in the way of a review, to be purely logical. But like, isn't that part of what makes someone a good critic, is their personal style and viewpoint? How they play into this is what makes them interesting, what makes them stand out, what makes them in the eyes of others worth listening to. Is why someone like Fantano got popular, because people thought his opinions were worth their time. Personality is what makes us unique. It's one of the things that makes us human. So to try and strip us of that is, well, except for sci-fi horror, and I'm not over trickle down lobotomies by Hello-Future-Me yet. So the other major reason for me is because review bombing has become such a problem. We've seen the issues with how review sites that allow members of the public to post their own reviews are affected. That's not a bad thing, obviously, but everyone is entitled to their opinion. But it's become turned into an excuse by people to dogpile on something they don't like, be it an album, a series, or a movie. And this idea of trying to ruin a series' reputation by spamming these sites with negative reviews will achieve what? Prove to everyone that your opinion is the correct one on this series, because look, clearly everyone thinks that, because the reviews are bad, and it's not like if you go down and just see all these clearly stating the same things that just read like spam or AI. And it's like, who are you trying to prove this to? To yourself? Are you? Because if you need to validate your opinions in such a way, maybe you don't actually believe them yourself, and are desperate for some kind of out of proof of your views, so much so that you'll push your agenda in such a way. And it's like, you're fooling no one, mate. If you truly believe that, would you feel the need to do this? It's become frustrating because fans and audience being able to post their opinions in this way can be so good for positive feedback, providing studios and executives with constructive feedback. This is specifically with Hollywood, because this is where most of the review bombing happens. It feels like Hollywood now barely takes this notice and just makes the dumbest decisions again and again and again. But that's a whole other video essay. But it has been taken this way, where any kind of legitimate negative feedback isn't taken on board and just gets lumped in with these people. And on the one hand, that's fair enough. No one artist should necessarily have to take on the critiques of others if they don't want to, feel the need to. But on the other hand, it's used by these studios to dismiss any criticism, even when there's generally good constructive criticism to be taken. And in an obvious statement, the point of critics is to be the counter to this subculture today, to be the ones giving constructive feedback that analyzes and gives an opinion that is thought through, nuanced, and clearly balanced, and doesn't let their emotions on the person affect the art. So, Halsey fans, do we have a fandom name? I don't know. Maybe we do know. Nothing comes to mind immediately. Yeah, don't go attacking people for doing their jobs. Just don't. But at the same time, Fantano, Pitchfork, whatever grudge you seem to hold against this woman this album feels unnecessary and one-sided against a woman who will probably never know you exist. If you don't like the album, fine. But why you felt the need to attack her personal life is just confusing at best and poor journalism at worst. I think when someone seems to be critiquing someone's personality when their job is to review the album and their art, yes, we should call them out on this. But again, not attacking them, no death threats, no doxing, none of that. We can be reasonable in our response to their own unpleasantness. Feel free to talk about why you said what you said, Charlotte, Fantano. I doubt you'll ever see this. but I'm just confused as to what you're going with here. So, I guess we can just all be reasonable. Is that too much to ask? Okay. I think this is finished, pretty much. So this is the first video I've done in like 2 years. See how it goes. Like and subscribe. See if that actually works. Yeah, we'll see what happens, because honestly it's been, if this could actually, if I can get back into this and maybe make something of it for once, that'd be great. Oh, and Halsey, please come back to the UK on this album cycle. I know you probably will, but I've been waiting to see you for like a decade. Again, she'll probably never see this, but sod it.